over 2 millennia, the magic of theater has brought joy, drama, and wonder to audiences and performers alike. As technology becomes better and better, the process of creating shows has become more complex and technically challenging. Today, theaters have to use more creativity and ingenuity and contribute more effort than ever to attract audiences to their shows. Sarasota, Florida, is the home of one of the most artistic communities in the country. It is here that the Players Center for Performing Arts has been producing shows since the early 1930s. Today, the Players Center is a community theater thriving in the area. The theater depends on local artists and performers to donate their time and talent to create magic in the black box and on the main stage. In this documentary, we take a look at what makes the Players Center unique and what goes into making a show come to life. For the Players, the process starts with the artistic director, who functions like a film producer in managing finances, researching what plays will work best, and finding the right talent to make the magic happen.
I read plays, I request the royalties, I work with the royalty house on paying, for the things, I do the contracts to get the shows, and then I contract the individuals, the directors, the stage managers, and all that. Contract the designers, and then put them together and have them do their thing for the 15 or so productions a year that we produce, both backstage, main stage, and then outreach.
Auditions are conducted months in advance for multiple shows at a time to determine the best fit for each performer. During the auditions, the actors deliver a monologue and sing a short piece, as well as demonstrate their abilities on the dance floor. Callbacks then take place in the following weeks so the players' staff can match roles to the actors' abilities.
The process is the team is selected. So there is a production team, which is your artistic director and your production manager, and then you have your director, your music director, choreographer, etc. We have production meetings early on before the rehearsal process starts, and we start talking about the play. I read the play and formulate a vision for the play. And then once that vision has been formulated, I explain that vision to my production team. And my vision for this production was finding your voice, because I felt that Ren, his voice through dance, was the voice that he needed to be heard in order to be a survivor.
You have your very first production meeting. Typically, we try to have that a week before rehearsals actually start. That's when the entire production team gets together. The designers, the director, the stage managers, the artistic director, anybody who is artistically involved in the theater. We talk through everything, the sets, the costumes, concept, production concept.
The show we'll be following is Footloose, the 1980s American musical drama set in the Midwestern town of Belmont, a small religious community where dancing and rock and roll have been outlawed.
The way I go about designing a show is, first I read the script a couple of times, and even then I start to get some inkling of a concept of how I'm thinking the show should look. Then I go into a meeting with the director and production staff, or I meet with the director privately sometimes, and we just knock ideas around. Then I come back into a production meeting, generally with some rough ideas in a direction that we could go. Those get okayed, or they want to go in a different direction, and then I go back home to my computer and I start putting things in the computer and I start drawing, and I come up with a full set of construction drawings and color renderings that I hand to the shop.
When I get design plans from the designer, then I will go and purchase materials or see what we have in stock, start pulling scenery for that, and start to build out in our shop, which is out on 10th Street.
My set is all cement and old rusted girders, as if they were in some kind of construction area out by the railroad tracks. And we use a lot of rear projection to specify where we are at certain times in a church, outside of a church. Plus we add some scenic pieces to the projection so that we're at a gas station, that we're at a salvage yard, all of that. But it's all designed to show oppression of these kids because they can't dance.
Because we're community theater, we have to work around actors and production staff schedules, so everybody else has another job or a family or whatever, so we try and work around those types of schedules, which is important for the community.
The actors here, it's a real treat because everyone's a volunteer. Some places they're semi-professional, so they have actors who are being paid and then volunteer actors, and everyone here is volunteer, so it puts everyone on an even playing field, which is fantastic because normally a 17-year-old wouldn't have the chance to play a lead anywhere except at school. But here we have such a diverse community that is in the Players shows. So we have people from ages 4 sometimes all the way into people in their 90s. So I think the actor specifically for this show is one of the youngest casts that we've had this season. We have middle schoolers and high schoolers make up a lot of the cast.
We took people from various backgrounds and experiences and we brought them together. Most of them didn't know each other, or a lot of them had not worked together before, and we brought them together and we developed a team and a family so that we can put together a successful performance. So the voices worked together and the actors worked very hard at their harmonies and their dance moves and that type of thing.
I had rehearsal for another show on the day of the auditions, so I sent Jeffrey, the artistic director, an email, and I said, I really want to audition for Footloose, but I can't be there for the auditions. Is there any way I can come directly to callbacks? And they usually don't do that, obviously, but luckily they opened a spot for me at callbacks, and I came in and I sang and I read, and then I think like a week later or so they called me and let me know that I had been cast. So it was a pretty short experience compared to most.
AJ Cowley, who's playing Ren in this show, he is a friend of mine that I've watched grow up on the stage, and he actually said, hey, I hope you're auditioning for Footloose. There's a scene in there that if we get these parts, it would be great to play this scene with you at the end. And it sold it for me, and I was hoping to take a break after my last show, but I went right into rehearsals for this, and it's been actually very rewarding.
Because it's 80s, it's kind of kitschy and fun, so you just kind of dive into that material, the Michael Jackson, all the stuff from the 80s, that early MTV, and use that as inspiration. I mean, a great example of that in the show is that opening number that has been costumed. It looks like something right out of MTV, like the beginning of MTV, which is kind of hysterical. But in this particular show, as I do with most shows, because it's a period piece, I guess it's 30-something years old, so it is technically a period piece. You have to kind of research that era and what the movements and the styles are and the music was during that time period and kind of pull from that.
Or else I'll tear up this town. Tonight I gotta cut loose, footloose, kick off your Sunday shoes.
Definitely some of the challenges for this show was the dancing, kind of what Dennis wanted me to do. I started to try to do them and I'm like, oh wow, okay. I guess I need to actually stretch and prepare and make sure I don't tear a muscle. So that was definitely one of the biggest challenges for this show. Jump splits and Russians and coffee grinder breakdancing moves, which I've never done before.
I had a night class, so I wasn't able to be here on Tuesdays or Thursdays. So we literally had, I think, 1.5 rehearsals for I Can't Stand Still choreography-wise. We put in a lot of the tricks that I have that Dennis kind of came in with a skeleton and he said, okay, this is what we need to do at these points, let's fill in the rest. So I learned the basic skeleton of what the song had to be, and then he was like, can you do an eagle? And I was like, sure. So that's when you jump up and you touch your toes. He said, show me some other tricks you can do. So we probably took 10 or 15 minutes and I was just doing things that I thought would be fun, which now part of it I regret because my knee hates me after every show because I have to do some of the things that I've put myself through. But it's the number where he is trying to show Willard what it was like in Chicago where he could dance. And of course, Ren doesn't know that dancing isn't allowed here yet. So working on this number for such a short amount of time and then putting it in the show was really difficult, and I didn't really get the hang of where everything should have been until we moved on stage. And as soon as there were lights, I really kind of got the gist of, what the song needed. And once we were in production mode, once we had makeup and lights and costumes, it was so easy and so much fun to do every night.
I Can't Stand Still, basically, again, you look at it as a form, like what are we trying to accomplish with this dance number? Because if you just kind of throw a dance number out there, it might be pretty to look at, but if it's not serving a purpose in the story, which it's supposed to and needs to in musical theater, there's no point to it. And in this number in particular, basically what it's doing, it's introducing you to Ren and his energetic style and the fact that he is always on the go and can't stop moving, and that's his way of expressing himself. And it's juxtaposed with all the other people in the town, or the students in that case, just kind of standing there knowing that that's not allowed and I can't do that and I haven't done that before. So it shows, basically, it's a great introduction to Ren and basically how he's gonna fit into the story.
Then somebody kill me, 'cause I can't stand still. No, no, no.
Learning the dance was really fun. I had a lot of freedom with what I wanted to do. Dennis, our choreographer, allowed me to, he would give me a general idea of what he wanted me to do. Then he would say, okay, well, do you think Ariel would do this? And I'd say yes or no, and I'd apply it to the dance. And then once we had that, I'd add the vocals, and once we had both of them together, it really made the dance turn into a number.
Putting a lot of these larger numbers together was a tough process because I was only in here usually on Sundays. So it takes me probably a good 3-hour chunk at least to hash out an entire number. And if it's a huge production number with everybody involved, usually the numbers are longer and they're much more complicated. So it was hard for me to kind of just throw it all together and then walk away for a week and just hope when I came back the next week it would kind of look like what I gave them. And they actually did a great job of that. I mean, they definitely worked on their own, and certainly some of them are not dancers at all. And I think it challenged a lot of them to kind of step up to the plate. And I'm honestly surprised at a lot of them at what they were able to accomplish.
It was funny because I was actually just looking at our rehearsal videos from the first couple weeks, and it's amazing the progress that we've made. Especially with such a big dancing show. When you first learn it, it's just not there. But I think everyone's really put in a lot of work, and you can tell that we've really come far.
The director and I meet and talk about what we want to incorporate into the show. And Kathy, in this case, we both had a clear vision of the 80s because we grew up in the 80s. So we really wanted to give the whole show an 80s look. And then from that point on, I'll do measurements on people. And then I've already got costumes pulled and picked. Some things have to be billed. A lot of trips to Goodwill. A lot of rummaging through other people's costume stocks to find just the right thing. And fortunately, nowadays with the internet, if I needed a two-tone Jordache jeans jacket from 1985, I can easily find one on places like eBay or Amazon. The opening scene in Footloose is the only one that is outside the realms of a Midwestern town, because we open up in Chicago, so I put all the performers in bright fluorescent 80s Madonna, Michael Jackson looking outfits with mullets and funky sunglasses and this stuff. I know when I've gone too far in the costuming when you can see one or two things that just doesn't fit. For instance, one of our leading actresses, I had her in a pair of orange jeans with a pink shirt, and it just really stood out as being unnatural against everybody else. So I took the jeans out, I dyed them down, it was still not right, so I just put a regular pair of jeans on her. Ren being from Chicago, he dresses much different than the fellas in the Midwest. But in the 80s, a lot of men basically wore Wranglers or Levi's 501s, Converse or Reeboks or work boots, cowboy boots, flannel shirts, polo shirts, and button-down dress shirts. There was not a lot of options, just colors changed as we went from the 70s to the 80s. So Ren kind of is just a typical 80s kid with his members-only jacket or his leather jacket, t-shirt, comfortable pair of broken-in jeans, and some Converse. Ariel's plot was a pick and mix because I had a lot of choices, and I kept her more in pinks and reds as well as denim, because the denim is really part of the whole Midwestern scene for them. But I found some great fringe jackets for her. It just really kept with the spirit of her. More very conservative, and I kept him conservative throughout. And being the type of minister he is, he wears a clerical collar in church on Sundays, but outside the church, he's basically a sweater and dress shirt kind of guy. Willard, just being the cowboy that he is, I kind of kept him in that cowboy mode of boots and hat and Western style shirts, which is a complete contradiction to Ren. And even though they are complete contradictions, they still become good friends. And Rusty is the wild child as well. She wants to be just as wild as Ariel, but there's a conservativeness to her as well. If the audience could come back here and see what's going on, they would be mind-boggled by the weirdness, the craziness, the artistry, everything about what goes on backstage at a theater.
And then she comes over and goes, oh my God, that's really great. And you can even step in and she'd be like, hey, why don't you? And you'd be like, I can't, no, that's not for me. And she's like, oh, girls, he's not like, oh, hey there, sexy man, you just ran into me. Does that make sense? That's how I want that to time out.
Yes? Let's try it.
It's very interesting as a musical director because you have to teach the score, you have to teach the actual notes, and it's not like acting, which can be a director's choice or an actor's choice. It's very specific. You have to sing this note at this time in this order. So it starts with the teaching of the notes, and then it goes into putting together whole songs, and then staging with the music, and then performance. I get very involved in the story, and I'm also listening for my cue lines. So I watch every performance. While I am playing and looking at my book, when I'm not looking at my book and don't have a page turn or something, I watch every performance because you never know where an actor's gonna go because it is live theater, so they could jump a cue and you have to be right there with them. I think that's what a good musical director does. May not get every note perfectly, but can translate from the page to the stage.
Start rehearsing with a read-through, and we start basic music and dance rehearsals. I do a lot of character development, working with the actors, talking about their character, developing that character. I find that makes for a richer character on stage. And then we do the blocking. So the blocking is I tell them where to move and go within the set that has been delivered to me through the set designer. And if there are problems with that set, and there were in this case in one of the scenes, so I have discussions back and forth with the designers, and we fix things as we go along. And then we rehearse, and then we get to technical weekend. We add lighting and sound and orchestra and that kind of thing to opening night, and then I hand it over to the stage manager for the run.
The way I definitely look at a show is where's point A and where's point B. So how do my lights change, especially in what they convey to the audience from the top of the show to the end of the show, and what sort of path they need to travel along. Sometimes in shows, people are actually following a path. Here, it's very much so a switch from the hard colors and deep shadows and like that really clubby sort of feel we start out in Chicago, through the path of Beaumont, which starts out with an all-white stage, very clean cut, very stark almost. And then as we start to add more colors in until the end, when it almost feels just like how it started out, because they bring those colors, but there's still a slight difference, because instead of the shadowed faces, right, Ren's in this dark place where his dad just left, his mom's packing him up and they're leaving. He's got nobody to really turn to. All of a sudden they all have each other. So now we see more faces. We have that brighter tone to all of those colors. And then it all comes down to me and the stage manager here. The stage managers are the ones who run the light board. So they're the ones hitting go on all of my cues. So I need them to be on the same page as me on how each scene should look and how it should flow.
I'm the assistant technical director here in the theater as well. I did some of the set building. I was also responsible for the set painting. So I did coordination of our volunteers and our set designer to paint the entire set. Then I also did props with a fabulous lady named Patty. She and I got together, made up the prop list, created all the props that you see in the show. As the lighting board operator as well, I have to make sure that all the lighting equipment is on and intact. That includes 3 movers, 2 power packs, and the spotlights and the lighting board. So I do pre-show checks on everything. I also call the show, which means I sit at the lighting board, I run the lighting cues, but I call to the spot ops and to the backstage crew and occasionally to the sound person over headset to stand by to bring on this set piece, or spotlight stand by to focus on Ren, something like that. So I spend the entire show running the technical and calling the technical aspect of it. Here at the Players, we have typically a 5 to 6 week rehearsal period, again, depending on the shows. With our musicals, it is typically 6 weeks. Then we have Tech Weekend, which is just 2 days of absolute hell. And then we have a final dress on Monday. We open for previews on Tuesday. We run for about 3 weeks.
The story of Footloose, which is based on the movie, which is based on a book, is a story about a young man from the city, in this case Chicago, whose family has to move to a small town.
And in this particular town, they have outlawed dancing, which was something that they outlawed years ago because of this accident that happened with these kids who went out of town and went dancing, and they had gotten involved with drinking and drugs, and one reason or another, it was bad weather, and on their return trip, the car was in an accident and all the kids died. So the town has decided that dancing was the core of all of this, so they've decided to outlaw that. And moving into this small town is a single mother and her son returning home to family, and she's moving there to stay, and he is from Chicago, a big city where obviously that isn't a law, and he is a very energetic, kind of outspoken young man, and he decides that this law is inappropriate and he's gonna fight it. So he takes it on and kind of pools all the kids together to make a case for bringing dance back.
Ren goes through a lot of different emotions and a lot of different challenges in this show. First, immediately, he is left by his father, so he becomes the man of his house as a senior in high school with very limited experience in doing so. So he has to protect his mom, and then he's faced with having to move from a big metropolis, Chicago, to a very small town with his aunt and uncle. And once he gets there, he is looked at as an outsider for a lot of reasons, mainly because he's a little rough around the edges, so he's a little snarky, a little sarcastic, a little bit of a punk compared to most of the homegrown farm boys in this town. And a lot of it is because that he loves to dance. And because of the traumatic accident that they had in Beaumont, dancing is no longer allowed. So he's faced with some personal struggles as well as some environmental struggles throughout the course of the show.
Ren comes along and everybody is pretty shocked because he starts dancing and everybody is telling him that is not okay, this is against the law. But Ariel, she thinks it's great. She loves that her daddy hates him, and that just makes her want him even more. So she forms a relationship with him, and they work together on bringing back the life of Beaumont. They want to have dances again. They want to be able to have fun.
Because of her strict father, she becomes very rebellious. She dates the bad boy, and she dresses in a way that her father doesn't approve of, and she meets this Ren, and it is the one person that in her life that really cares about her and what she thinks and what she wants. And so they develop this friendship and eventually a romance, and Ren decides that he needs to gather the kids in the school together, and they need to change the law and they need to bring dance back to Beaumont. And he's going to prove that dance does not bring on promiscuity, they just need to do it for fun. Ariel, being the minister's daughter, helps him find passages in the Bible that show that dance is important to life. And so he pleads his case, but the town council has already had their mind made up, and the answer is no.
The real turning point comes down to not a huge number in the show, but just a small moment between Wren and Reverend Moore when he actually confronts him about his decision and why he made his decision, and really gets him to think about why he chose not to have dancing in the first place and why he got the council to vote the way he did.
There's a very spiritual, religious motif in the story where Shaw Moore, the pastor of the town, is sort of struggling with some of his own personal spiritual issues and is trying to also be a good father and a good husband.
It appears that the Reverend, he's just protective of his daughter and protective of the town, and that he's very evil. But you find out through backstory and everything that there was this accident, this terrible accident that happened, and that some people in the town were hurt, and because of they've lost people. And you find out that the Reverend lost somebody, lost his own son. I think he has created such power in himself that he has basically put everybody into submission, you know, and then his wife starts speaking out, and then his daughter becomes rebellious. And
I think anytime you're faced with a position of authority as a younger person, I know this from experience, so if there's a teacher who you have a problem with, something in the classroom is going wrong, but you really strongly believe in what you're saying, you have to speak out. And I think that is part of what makes Wren so important, and part of what makes Shaw, the Reverend, his relationship with Wren so important, is that he is the obstacle, he's the authoritative figure that is blocking what Wren wants. And likewise, Wren is the obstacle that is keeping Shaw from what he wants. So I think the push and pull in that relationship is most of the story.
Nonsense! All I say is, who's up for a little dancing? And the only thing the people in this town can think about is the Patani Bridge and 4 young kids.
Mr. McCormick!
And I know your son was one of them. And I'm sorry. I am truly sorry for your loss. But honoring their memory by shutting out the world isn't working.
Playing the scenes every night with Ken, who plays the Reverend, it's such a treat because he is such a fantastic actor and he puts so much emotion, and it's so easy to play off of him. But we're faced with a really difficult few scenes to where I am trying my best and best and best to persuade him, and he just will not listen. And then there comes a point where he finally opens his ears, and I think that is the turning point of the show.
Wren comes in and helps him to realize something as simple as dancing can start actually healing and helping.
He sort of brings everybody back to life and shows them that you can dance and have it not be, you know, dangerous and related to drugs and alcohol, and it can just be a fun expression that young people need to thrive.
so I think Wren's challenge is to make himself heard and to show everybody that you don't have to hurt this way.
It's okay to speak your mind, because sometimes what you have to say, even if it's not what everybody else wants to hear, it's what needs to be heard.
In most musical theater, there is a structure for like an ingenue, like your basic romantic leads, and then there's like these comic secondaries, which is kind of where Willard and Rusty kind of fall into the show. They offer a lot of comic relief, certainly Willard does. He's not the sharpest tool in the shed, and he offers a lot of the comic relief as far as the story is concerned too.
They have a very cute dynamic. You know, they've known each other since they were little, but nothing's ever happened. It seems like they're both waiting for the other person to make the first move, which is really cute.
You've got to feel like there's something there, even though part of the humor of it is that we don't know what's there. We as characters have not actually had anything romantic, but you're still supposed to sense that there's this almost destined romantic connection between them, even with Willard's awkwardness and Rusty's polar opposite personality.
I think what she sees in him is that he's really deep down a sweet kid that was raised by a good mama.
They just have difficulty communicating with each other. That's the biggest issue. And every time Willard opens his mouth, Rusty gets excited, no matter how short the sentence is. But it's really cute because she just appreciates everything that he does, and she sees that there's more to him than the stupidity.
They are two kids who really, really like each other and just can't quite connect. Part of it is because she never stops talking and he can't get a word in edgewise. He's afraid he's not good enough for her. But once again, it's not about being good enough. It's just about, hey, I like you. Let's try this, you know? And so that's one of the most rewarding things for me in the show, is to see the payoff of that couple.
I can't swim.
Hey, fellas, what do you say we throw him in the pool?
My favorite dance number is definitely the hardest. It was Let's Hear It for the Boy, where Rusty's showcased as the singer and I'm kind of showcased as the dancer, and it's where Willard learns to dance. It is definitely a really fun number that gets the crowd very involved. Cassandra does an amazing job singing it, and maybe I do a decent job of selling the awkwardness to a somewhat capable dancer throughout it.
You were saying? My baby, he don't talk sweet. He ain't got much to say.
Basically, what we're telling in that story is Willard may be awkward and weird and not the smartest or dressed the best, but Rusty still loves him. There's something about him that's so endearing and that has captured her heart, and basically that's what she's trying to convey in that song.
I think Let's Hear It for the Boy is one of the most well-placed songs. It's perfect. It's just a great way to start the second act. I think that of the jukebox musicals that are out there, Footloose is one of the better ones.
My baby may not be rich, watching every dime, but he loves me, loves me, loves me. We'll always have a real good time. And maybe he sings off key, but that's alright by me, yeah. 'Cause what he does so well, makes me wanna yell, let's hear it for the boy.
Also within this song too, we kind of give Willard a chance to kind of start to dance and figure those things out, and he just dives into it and he has fun with it and he kind of succeeds. So it's an arc for him to become more outgoing, and it's an arc for her to kind of explain what her love is for him and their relationship.
Let's hear it for the boy.
Vocally, it's scary for me. You know, there's a really high note at the end that I'm just, praying comes out of my head somehow. The funny thing is I miss a lot of that number because I'm focused on my singing, and there's a lot of cool dancing going on behind me.
When she hits the notes that you expect to hear at the end of Let's Hear It for the Boys, I'm just back there going, wow, that's incredible.
Oh, maybe he's no Romeo, but he's my loving one-man show. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Let's hear it for the boy. 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 Hear it for the boy.
It's not particular to the dance, but I think Ren and Ariel have a wonderful scene down on the bridge where they come down and just sit on the front of the passerelle, and Ren talks about his dad, and it's a real tender moment between the two of them, which is important in musical theater because you have these great, big, lavish, fun numbers, but you need to have these small moments too to keep the story interesting and valuable, and I think the two actors do a wonderful job with that scene too.
The bridge scene was my favorite. That was actually one of the first scenes I really looked at, and I was like, okay, this is where I really need to make a statement. And it's funny, the master electrician here, who's the one who helps me hang all the lights, make sure all the circuiting's done correctly and everything like that, she knows I have this tendency where I love to add a little light into the audience. It's kind of one of the things I've done in every show I've done here. And I have a blast with it because I think it really helps draw the audience in for especially really touching or really poignant sort of scenes, the ones that really, they matter, you know what I mean, that I want them to be really invested in. And for this one, I have a light that's all the way in the back of the house, and it puts stars out across the entire stage, up onto the side walls, and through the seats. And it's great because I see all the heads come up as soon as it goes on, and the audience starts looking around like, wow, everyone here is covered in stars. And there's just starlight everywhere. And it kind of draws them into it because the stars come up first before the cast comes on, so it gives the audience a moment to settle into it. And then it creates this depth to the stage that really lets the bridge come to life. It's Ariel's diary, so it's important to not only the show, but especially to her and who she is at her heart as a character. So I wanted to make sure that they found her heart too.
I really love I'm Free because that is the Act 1 closing number. So this is where Ren encourages his fellow classmates that throwing this dance really is a good idea and that it would be a big step for the town. So I started off by singing a little bit, dancing a little bit on my own, and then eventually some of the students learn the choreography and they do it with me, and then everyone ends up in a huge riot of dancing, and then I get a really cool, we call it the tumble sauce moment, where I do a few flips. It's a huge adrenaline rush because you never know, something could go wrong, and it's when you're doing it, it's really like slow motion. Like I put my hands on the ground and I flip myself forward, and I'm just thinking, am I gonna land it? Am I gonna land it? And then when I do, and I jump up and I do the Footloose jump that is on the playbill and all the posters, it's such a rewarding moment because that's the first moment in the show where all of the kids are united to where I'm no longer an outsider, and I think that is one of my favorite moments of the show, for sure. I think the main message of Footloose is that adults should listen to children as if they are equal in some ways, because oppressing children and telling them that what they want isn't important just because you're older or because you've dealt with something difficult doesn't mean that they have to go through the same thing. And I think that's a huge lesson that Shaw learns, is that he has to let Ariel and the young kids in his town move on from the traumatic accident that happened, because if they keep brushing it under the rug, it's just going to get harder and harder to deal with, and eventually it's going to explode. And I think guiding kids with a warm hand instead of telling them what they shouldn't do is the main message.
I really do think that the reason the show is a success and the reason that I love watching it is the fact that there is a piece of me in this show and how it moves, and in those songs and in those words of the songs. The fact that we have a cast that is singing beautifully and acting brilliantly and dancing wonderfully, that's the bonus. But the material is what speaks to me. And I think that's what's speaking to our audiences. And that's why 400 people have been coming and blowing our box office up. I think it's interesting that 33 years ago, that song was a #1 hit. And that movie spoke to a generation. And now they're coming to see this show. And I'm just proud that I took a chance on it. No one's done it in the area for years. I'm not gonna say I guessed, but it's a qualified guess of whether a show is gonna be a success. I love watching it. I love watching the kids.
There's so many people back here right now getting ready to do a show. And by the end of today, there's gonna be tears, you know? And with every show I do, it's the bonding aspect of it. I know that the emotion and the friendship that these people feel, and I know that this show has helped people. There are people in this cast that deal with depression, deal with anxiety, deal with social awkwardness. But this helps us find that venue that we can be who we are and we can share our art.
On any Sunday, Lord, I pray, show me exactly the words to say. Give me strength and maybe then I can reach my fellow men, so we all may rise again. Thank you, Lord. Amen.
The part of Footloose that really brought this together was working with a group of people that I hadn't worked with before. To see them in their glory, it's just great. It's great to see that. I think I fell in love with the cast before I fell in love with the story.
This cast is an all-star cast. Everybody's holding their own and then some. So that definitely stood out to me. The beginning process, you know, you're kind of feeling everybody out. You're kind of feeling what the rehearsal is going to be like and seeing what the show is going to be like. And as you just start to pick up on everybody's skills as you're going along through scene to scene, it really showed me that, you know, we could put on a really solid show with the talent level and the caliber of people that we had in this cast.
On any Sunday morning, here we'll be, raising our voices in harmony, gathering to join the feast, asking God what Lord at least. We pray that one day, once our trials have ceased, we will be released.
Go in peace.
Footloose has just been an absolute joy to work on in every respect. And just this cast alone is just, I can't say anything more than they're just phenomenal.
There's not awkwardness between actors. There's nobody in the cast with big egos. There could be people in the cast with big egos, but there's not. And everybody's very, very, very supportive of each other.
We ask them to push themselves farther. We ask them to do character development. We ask them to do flips on stage, and they did. It was just an incredible working experience, and when I work with them, I don't see the young people as kids. I see them as seasoned actors, which is what they are.
So, but you guys are all very, very special. I'm glad you're doing this, and the energy in this room, every time you've come in, has just been out of this world. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything. Thanks.
Thank you. There really wasn't a time where I can remember being frustrated or disappointed. I think everyone really gave it their all throughout the whole process, and we ended up with a really awesome product.
During Tech Week, it's always a struggle to find that motivation sometimes, just because it's intense hours. I'm usually here at 6 in the morning, working through until around midnight, and I am putting everything I've got into it. But it's great because I know at the end of it, I'll have this gorgeous production with my name on it that I can look at and say, you know, I did that, I added to that. And I love that about theater because it's such a collaborative effort to bring something really kind of touching and moving in a lot of ways to the stage.
The moment I auditioned here, I knew I was gonna have a blast. There was not one person that I had an issue with. Everybody was so sweet. I remember my first show, I was so intimidated. I was the only teenager in the whole cast, and everybody was so nice, and I knew that I wanted to do it again. And being in Footloose, the cast that we have is so amazing. Everybody, I feel like I have a second family here at the Players Theater, and it's really hard to get something like that in a community theater. So I really cherish all the people that I've met and the amazing community that this theater has brought up.
I think every day has something brilliant or funny that happens, you know, and I live for those things too. I mean, that's why we're here, to have fun and laugh. I mean, we're here to learn as artists and grow and develop things, but if it's not fun, it's just not worth it. So I think every day should have something fun in it.
As a performer and putting my heart and soul into a production and donating my time, I like what the Players does because they reward their performers.
I feel like I'm always laughing and smiling here, even when there's times where I'm like super frustrated or annoyed. There's always somebody here to put a smile on my face.
Everybody go!